The other chooses the question. Good.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. What we are here to talk today really is about, I think it's a pleasure to have such an experienced hotelier like Nakul here. I think I should backtrack as to why I'm here interviewing him. It's a special gift in life when you have a long friendship and a deep friendship. So I think we've been blessed with this. We've sat together, just like we're sitting today, in 1971. We were the two day scholars at Bishop Cotton School in Simla. So our friendship goes back to 48 years, and it's been really
Always kept in touch.
Yeah, always kept in touch, and it's been a pleasure and a joy, to have him as a friend.
Likewise, both ways.
So today, what we have for you is that we have so many general managers in this room and other, budding leaders of the industry. We thought the emphasis should be really on trying to share with you some nuggets about a distillation of experience, a rich experience of last 40 years, that Nakul has, he's Mr. Anand to most people in this room. He's done us proud because he's not just been a tremendous hotelier, but he's performed yeoman services to the industry in his capacity as leadership capacities at HAI and at WTTC and I think at Faith and various other forums. And now he's heading as an executive director at ITC. His responsibilities vast exceed hospitality and into lifestyle and various other things. So to jump in straight away, Nakul, first thing is, if it wasn't hotels, which profession would you have chosen?
Rajiv, you'll be surprised that my first job was a DJ, a disc jockey, right? And I still love my music, and I think I was waiting my turn to get into a hotel company, and I continued to play music. I believe I would have continued as a disc jockey.
Basically, you like to make people dance.
Absolutely.
One person, Nakul, who's had a tremendous impact on you, maybe who's been a mentor to you, and how that person has kind of helped you shape you into what you are today?
I think it goes without doubt that I think it's Mr. Deveshwar, and I think that you all know that we just lost him last week, and I think he was a mentor to me, and he was never a hotelier initially, and my first experience was with him. My first interaction with him was that I was a night manager at a hotel called Chola. Those days used to have only one manager at night, who was the night manager. And Mr. Deveshwar was a guest who used to come from Calcutta. He was in charge of the printing and packaging division. And next morning when he was leaving, I said, you haven't had breakfast, Mr. Deveshwar. So he said, do I still have time? I said, yes. So we both went up. We had a small coffee shop there called the Markara. And now this is a non-hotelier, an engineer, typical Punjabi by nature, loves his egg bhujia, parantha, etc., etc. And so he asked for a fruit platter, and the fruit platter comes. He looks at it and he says that there's something wrong with it, isn't it? Don't you think so? I said, sir, the fruit's excellent. We take great pride in getting great food, etc. He said, no. He said, when I begin to eat it, it must flow in a manner that the sweetest fruit must be at the end, right? And the least one must be the first one that you eat. And that's how you should always put a fruit platter. Now, here I was a hotelier. I'd been through management training school, prided myself at nearly having topped it, etc. And here was somebody. But that's the sort of man that he was. He looked at everything. He saw what everybody else saw, but thought differently, etc. His advice, he made me a general manager I was all but 27. His first advice was continue to read. He says reading will give you ideas. Ideas will set benchmarks. He said benchmark, you now begin to create, and that becomes bench create. And he said that the more you read, there are many times that you'll pick up ideas from the others, and it doesn't matter. If it's not invented here, be the second first. So I learned this term from him, be the second first, that very often you can pick up an idea somewhere or the other. Before anybody else can sort of get into it, you get into it and you're second first. And he said second first is also a great strategy, not to say that you don't have to be a leader. I think end of it that he sort of got that spirit, and I've served with him directly for the last 15 years is in the corporate management committee. And I think the biggest takeaway from him, if I was to sum it up in one word, was that I think that he says that his philosophy, or if I was to sum it up, is that you never win a silver, you lose a gold, right? You could never go in. To him, that was all about it. You've got to go for the best. His attitude was you could never say that I won a silver. You say, no, I lost the gold. And I think I owe a lot of my professional, my attitude, my discipline of reading every morning, and that really opened up my sort of mind. And he would check back with me regularly that what I was reading, and we would talk and debate, I think meant a lot. So his entire strategy, and I was part of the team that sort of worked on his strategy of how ITC diversified, and we got into the FMCG business. With very clear understanding, again, he said that, and I don't want to talk about ITC, but just take a minute, that when we sort of set out on this path, he says that we must be able to derive some strategic advantage from one of our other divisions, and we'll only get into that businesses. So we got into the food business. What does the food business? Let me take a simple example as our chips business, right? They derive their back end from our agri business, where we source the best of potatoes through our e-Chupal. They derive recipes, etc., from our chefs. They derive packaging skill from our packaging division. They derive distribution from our traditional business where we distribute, right? So it's a combination of synergies together that give us a strategic advantage. Otherwise, you would not be able to fight or not be able to take on multinational brands that they were. So much I could talk all day.
I can see the passion. I can see the passion.
A lot more.
And without doubt, he's an icon and will remain an icon.
Absolutely.
In corporate India.
And putting India first. He had only once and putting India first.
And gentlemen, I think the importance of a mentor can never be, underestimated. And it is, in life, we will all be passing the baton, from one to another. And today, there are several people here who several generations sitting in this room. But really, and mentoring is nothing to do with is not really by age or by seniority. It's really it's an act, it's a process, it's a responsibility. Okay, Nakul, what do you never delegate?
I think two things can never be delegated. One, I think a leader can never delegate responsibility. Right? You've got to take on the responsibility to yourself, irrespective of whatever be the circumstances. Whatever happens, the leader has to take full responsibility. I think second, which you can never delegate, is that in an opportunity or in a problem which you're seeking for a solution, you can't delegate your thinking. Right? You're open to ideas, but you can't say that, okay, four of you get together and come back with some thoughts on it. Your own thoughts on these important issues are very important, so you can never delegate your thinking.
How do you measure success? I mean, we have the balance scorecard and all that, but leave that. And the triple line, leave that.
I think that if I was to measure my success of a person, I think that my success would be what value I've been able to add to other hoteliers and people who work with me when I leave, right? If I've got, as you rightly mentioned, 40 years of experience, Rajiv, you've got 40 years of experience. What good is that if this hindsight could become somebody else's foresight? Isn't it? It's as they say, that wisdom is the comb that God gives you when you're bald, right? It's too late to use it. But if I can arm you all, right, and I can arm people who work with me with knowledge that I've gained, and therefore they will have a head start. So I think I would consider myself successful if I've been able to pass on, in some form or the other, knowledge to lots of you, and therefore make my hindsight your foresight.
So how do you do this?
Many ways to do it. I think that there's a team of ITC people here, colleagues here, and mentors, speaking, articles. I circulate something every morning on new ideas that I've picked up. At least one new idea I circulate every morning religiously. But just coming back to measure of success, I think that this is as far as personal is concerned. I think that even as far as organizations is concerned, values are changing, right? And when values change, you've got to change. Products today are not measured by price, but by quality. People are not measured by income, but again, quality of life. Companies are not measured by profit alone, but by their triple bottom line, what they've done for society, in addition to what they've done for, obviously, their own shareholders. Nations are not judged by GDP, but by the well-being of the people. So I think at one level, the values are changing, and the values are bringing about new measures, right? So this is on an official level, and that's on a personal level. That's how I would sort of measure success.
What qualities do you look for in your general managers?
What qualities do I, I think the first, I'd like to begin with a little quote that I jotted down and hoping that you would ask this question, right? That our destiny is not created, Rajiv, by the shoes we wear, but the steps we take, right? So it's our destiny, it's by the steps we take. And I think good human beings make great professionals, right? So I think the first quality of a general manager must be a great human being, good professional integrity, and above all, right? His integrity has to be very, very of a very, very high order that absolutely cannot be challenged.
So what qualities do you disapprove of?
Tough one, but yes, what I certainly, I think there is a fine difference between what you do for the organization and how you position yourself. I must never forget that I'm an ambassador of the organization, right? And I cannot put myself before the organization. It's like there was a time that we would go ahead and say, take a brand like Bukhara and keep publicizing a chef. But the brand has to live, for eternally, isn't it? And therefore, the brand is more important than the person behind it. Similarly, it shouldn't be that this hotel is only good because Rajiv Kaul or Nakul Anand is the general manager. Right? You can't put yourself before the organization. And really what happens here is that I think here is an essential difference between how a general manager chooses, the difference between what warmth and familiarity. Right? Being warm to a guest is very different to getting familiar to it. And there's an old saying in Hindi that in getting familiar with a guest, right, it says ki ghoda agar ghas se dosti karega to khayega kya. Right? So the moment we get familiar with guests, that we are sort of diluting our own business, we've got to remain warm, etc. And we tend to get familiar because the I comes before the company. Right? I'm representing the I more than anything else. I think the I has to be taken out, and I'm an ambassador of the company. And the Leela Delhi is a great hotel. Not Rajiv Kaul was a great general manager, or Nakul Anand was a great general manager in Moria. The ITC Moria is a great hotel.
Our task is to build institutions.
Yes, our task is to build institutions and not put yourself. We just happens to be the means to an end, right? We are not the means in itself, and we must always remember that and never put ourselves in that.
Nakul, do you think that the GMs of today are having as much fun as we guys had, or we were lucky to have? Or is life too complicated for these guys? We didn't have so many numbers. So we were still, I remember for us there's a science and there's an art of hoteliering. Yeah. And I think we had a chance to practice both. Do you think these guys have that today?
When Rajiv, when we were sort of at the HOD level, we used to interact with vice presidents. We used to go back to the locker room and say, yeah, we've heard the same thing again, that hamare time pe ye hota tha, ab nahi hota. So I don't want to get into that. I don't want to be accused of that. So I certainly don't want to tread into that, no. I think that one good thing that has happened today, which didn't exist in our time, that the way the world is moving, it has made people sort of bring into what is called the work-life balance. It never existed. That word never existed, and I wish it had existed. It doesn't mean that you had more fun then or more fun. I think the amount of fun that you have depends on the individual, right? The same individual in this environment or that environment could have sort of managed work with fun, etc. Always said that there is no good or bad weather, only inappropriate clothing, isn't there? So similarly, it's the person, right, and how he would have there. So it's not that a person could have, if a person wanted to enjoy his work, would have done it then and could do it now. A person who didn't want to and just wanted to look at the other side of it would do it that way. So I think it's the person.
I mean, we never, this expression of work-life balance, it never existed. And I think the silver lining to the cloud was that, you may not have been paid very well, but you had no time to feel poor.
Yeah, absolutely.
You never had time to spend money, so you never felt poor. So I think that's a model we should explore again. Yeah. Nakul, what are some qualities that you would recommend to our audience here, to becoming a more effective general manager?
I
mean, a leader, and I'm using general manager only as an illustration, because
it's
to becoming more effective.
Yes,
that's all, because that's what it's all about.
It's really not really about a general manager of a hotel. I think it's a general philosophy of life. I think one of the greatest books that I ever read in my life, and my colleagues here will sort of know about it, is Good to Great, right? And the greatest line of that book was the first line, which said, "Good is the enemy of great." Right? Very often when you're good, you never become great because you're so content having been good. But having said that, it spoke about two types of leadership further down in the book. And I think that has always stayed with me, and it says that there are two types of leaders, and it takes us one as the mirror, and it talks as one as the window. And they say the successful person would be that, right, who in the event of failure, right, first looks at the mirror and then looks out of the window. And in the event of a success, first looks out of the window, who was responsible for this, and then looks at the mirror. The other type of leader, when there's success, would first look at the mirror and say, what a great job I did, right? And when there is failure, would look out of the window and say, who made this happen? It wasn't me, obviously. You've got to correct this attitude and first look at yourself. Believe me, that changes your entire attitude. We've always said, it's your attitude and not your aptitude that will determine your altitude in life, right? So this is the attitude that you go. It's not I, right? It's who helped me get to the success, and what did I do wrong in the event of a failure. I think that's a very, very important quality that I would look at.
We've seen in our careers people who are doing very well, and then suddenly they fall off the radar. What is one thing that you've seen which kind of derails somebody's career? Because that's a nugget which people should avoid and be careful about.
I think as you go on in life, and you need to begin to prioritize, you can't do everything, right? And if I really trace back, and if I was to give one line of advice to everybody, that what would that advice be, and what have you really learned in life? And 40 years of not only hoteliering, I'd say rather of management has taught me. I'd again sum it up in one. I'd say focus on A in the ABC, right? I think people who've got on A in the ABC, first identify what are the important parts for you to focus on, be it opportunities, be it problems. Those are ABC, and in that, spend a disproportionate time focusing on A. So if you're able to identify what are the areas that require your focus and not everything, and you could go and spend 2.5 hours in a staff cafeteria, right, not adding value, I'm saying. Well, your presence there would always add value, but you could have been spending time there. So being able to identify, right, being able to see, being able to separate the wheat from the chaff and say, what is the A in the ABC, and focus your time on ABC. Rightly said by somebody that if you spend the first half an hour every morning on your biggest opportunity, see where it will get you.
We've read so many books, we've followed so many trends over past decades. What are one or two things that you think were totally overrated?
I think we discussed it in the past. I think perfection. Sometime to get from that 99 to 100%, right? Spend too much time. 99% was sufficient. You didn't have to get to that 100%. Life is not a magical act where you've got to hit the bullseye every time, right? Sometimes just getting we were discussing earlier, that it's the what the pencil write that's important, and not how sharp it was, and just trying to sharpen it and get that final edge sometime. It's non-value adding. I think we spend far too much time on that.
So one rule you think everybody should be allowed to break at work?
One rule that everybody should be allowed
break at work at ITC.
It's fine to say no. That would be the rule, right? Very often you've got to say no. And it's absolutely fine to say no, and you have our blessings to say no, because even if it's a guest, because we believe you would do it in the maturity that it's not possible. There business you may want to turn down. You're a qualified general manager. We have full trust in you. So I think that one rule that everybody should be allowed to break when he reaches at least these levels is to say no, and we would trust him on that decision and never question that.
I was asking questions from Nakul Anand, the person. I think now we're going to get a little bit into hoteliering, and particularly, the excellent work that he has led at ITC. So how have you differentiated the ITC guest experience from other luxury competitors?
I think it's all about the sort of philosophy that we have promoted. I think that what we have, and if I may take leave of modesty, what we have successfully done, that we've taken Namaste beyond just being a symbol or a greeting, right? So we begin with the Namaste. Namaste is an open door with the Namaste. Who do you do this to? You do this to welcome a guest, right? Our entire philosophy of this is you welcome this guest. When you welcome the guest, we go back to the traditional old Indian saying of Atithi Devo Bhava, the guest is God. Now, when you've come into my house, you're my guest, it is my responsibility to give you all the luxuries. Mehman Nawazi, we do that all. At the same time, your safety, your security is my responsibility because you're the guest in my house, right? And that's how we combine. So it begins with the Namaste, comes to the guest, I welcome you. It's now my responsibility to look after you in the most luxurious manner. It's my responsibility to make sure you're in the safest surroundings, you're given the best of food, etc. It's also my responsibility, while I'm doing this, to make sure that I'm looking after other aspects, because traditionally, I think the care for environment began with India, if you were to read the Vedas, etc. And how I look after that, how I look after the associates who in turn serve you, and so on and so forth. So there's a whole philosophy behind how we've taken the Indianness of the Namaste, linked it up to what I say, the Atithi Devo Bhava, and take it all the way forward. I think that differentiates us, it differentiates our properties. Our properties are sort of rooted in the soil. This is the overwhelming sort of differentiator that we talk about.
What is the most expensive mistake you have made in your career?
You know, I was the other day thinking, and right, you know, people who work with me know that I have a fetish for number 5, right? Not because my birthday is 5, my anniversary is 5, my wife's birthday is 5, my children are born on 5s, both of them, etc. But when we sum up our plans, when we've done all this thing, we all put together what is our big 5, right? So we said this is the big 5 opportunities, and all I want to look at in the plan and understand what the planning process has gone is by people showing me what the big 5 for the year is. Now, the big 5 is not achieve so much revenue. That is the end. I want to see the means and what are the 5 activities that you think. Similarly, I was trying to think up and link up and see what were the 5 failures. Very difficult to identify, one failure, etc. But certainly, and one must reflect back. I was able to reflect on 3 at least, and gives me time for 2 more, Rajiv. I think the first one was that this is a cyclical industry, and when the ITDC disinvestment came about, it was the worst time that the industry was ever having. And yet those properties were going for a sound. We were sitting at Qutub, and the hotel next to us, the Qutub Hotel, our office was in Qutub, which I could see from my window, was sold for a princely sum of whatever, 28 to 30 crore. The Kovalam was bought by you. The Mahabalipuram Hotel was bought by somebody else. The Ashoka was bought by the Lalit. Absolutely great assets at literally no. But when you are at the bottom of the cycle, right, and you've already had investments, etc., you sort of look at the returns and you didn't push that forward to the board. In hindsight, the business is cyclical. It could come back and recover. The down cycle is a great time to buy assets, irrespective of whatever phase you are. I think that was one big mistake. We let go and we didn't buy a single property when we had all the resources to do so. Again, I think that the second mistake, which I believe that we as a company did, and again under my helm, was that I think 2006-07 was the year that we've never seen again the profits that we've had. Very anxious to sort of return the profits to the company and get a pat on the back, but that's only for a moment. A lesson in this industry is that this is a long-term industry. It will have its ups and downs. When you have the peak period, spend to save, right? There's a lot of money that you can spend when you have a lot of it. Spend some of it to save for the future when times are not down. You could do a VSS for staff who wanted to be parted with. You could invest in technology that reduces your energy bill and so on and so forth. We didn't do that. We were very anxious to get a pat on the back now.
We thought the cycle is going to hit a new high.
The cycle, no? and for years it could have saved us a lot of money had we done it then. And instead of, say, a 500 crore profit, if I had given 450, heavens wouldn't have fallen, right? But the anxiety to give that, etc. I think the third one, a little micro as it may be, but I think there's again, I was general manager at the ITC Maurya. peak times absolutely 2006, 2007. We had the British Airways crew with us, and we signed them on at $240. Now you can imagine $240 for a 40-room crew. Those were the days. And you know, Rajiv and I have had the good fortune that when I was front office manager at we finished school together. I went into the ITC management training. He went into the Uberoi. We used to continue to keep in touch. There was a time he was FOM at the Uberoi Delhi. I was FOM at ITC Maurya. There was a time he was GM at the Uberoi Delhi. I was GM at the ITC Maurya. So we go back many ways. Anyway, so those were the good days of crews at $240, $250. So the crew came, and the crew contract manager came and said that I'd like to sign for 3 more years, right? And at a 10% escalation. I said, no. I said, you can't do this to me. I said, you must be crazy. I'll sign at $350 next year. The next year we signed at $85. Right? So bird in hand is better than 2 in a bush. But our cycle changes so fast, etc. Every morning I would wake up and calculate how much I've lost. And I'd look at the daily report and say, this is the ERR without crew. This would have been, and I got 240 plus 10, etc. Never gave myself for that.
Would you like to share an important decision that you have taken in the last 1 year?
So I think some of the it's really at an input stage, Rajiv, and I remember we speaking about it. I think that we are reorienting, Rajiv, a lot of our service designs based on a new trend, and I think that there is very definite. You and I grew up on what made Ritz-Carlton, what made Four Seasons what they are, because they empowered their associates, isn't it? We were quoted examples throughout and how you need to empower. If somebody comes and asks you that I need 3 hours extra and don't want to check out, is the person empowered to do it? And somebody signs a slip if you had a problem and gives you a free room and so on and so forth. I think the world has changed today. Today, instead of empowering the associates, which may also be necessary, you need to empower your guests, right? The guests, and there is a very strong correlation between how much the guest is in control and what his satisfaction levels are. Right? So there is a shift from empowering of from associate to empowering of the guest, right? And we put in a whole lot of service designs by way of technology, by way of delivery, by way of food and beverage, by way of giving him choices, how we are going to bring alive empowering the guest. And I think that's going to pay good dividends and sort of redesign many of our service designs for next year or the coming year.
You know, Nakul is one person who follows trends studiously. I think he has the best collection of trends, and very often, in fact, I think twice I've requested you to make a formal presentation, and he has an amazing amount of information on trends. So I think I'm tempted to share with us 2 or 3 of the latest trends that you have.
No, I think one is, of course, this. I think the trend of wellness is spreading more than anything else. I think it's really a trend of, it's not that earlier absence of sickness was wellness. Today it's no longer that. I think wellness is coming on as a strong trend, and you will see wellness reflected in your rooms. You will see people demanding it in your internal air quality. You will see people demanding it in the dampness of your room. People will demand measuring of wellness while you're in the washroom, whether you're in the bath or whether you're in that. Wellness in your food, wellness in your gym, wellness all around. So I think wellness is a trend of the future, and you cannot take it away from there. It's going to become an essential part of the hotel, and it's not going to certainly be restricted to, it's not going to be restricted to the gym alone at best. So I think that's one. Second, as I mentioned to you, empowering the guest is a very, very, very important trend that is sort of kind. But I think the single largest trend that has affected just about every business, and I think if you study it, and what really affected it is the movement into smartphones, etc. How does it affect and how did it affect us is that till such time that smartphones and internet on the go came across, I think that being a part of society was reserved for the very few at the top. Right? You would hobnob with the best, etc., etc. So bragging rights would only come to those people. You bought those, it was a car, it was this, that, etc. As this opened up and various social media sites opened up, right? I think everybody became a part of the society, right? And you entered what is called a new status sphere, right? And now I could be a nobody, and yet I'm on this status sphere.
Sure.
My satisfaction, right, would come from what I put and what I post. Right, this guy went this, he went there, he climbed the Himalayas, he trekked there, he went to the Leela, he went to the ITC, he had this family in Anand, right? It's all about creating these experiences, putting it quickly and getting us, because this is what is giving you satisfaction. What makes this happen is what you call status boosters, right? It is status boosters which give you the satisfaction which you put onto your social media, and you sort of gain higher weight in the status sphere as far as that is concerned. It is our job as hoteliers to create these status boosters or empower our guests with these status boosters to give them, very simply put, Instagram moments and so on and so forth. So I think the essential trend is that everybody has today become part of the status sphere, as I call it, right? And therefore, life has changed a lot.
Oh, we're running out of time. I just want to ask one last question before we, as leaders, I think one thing which we are tasked with is, how do you get an extraordinary performance from even an ordinary person? So whether it's inspiration or other things, what is your mantra, Nakul? What exactly is your way of doing it?
I don't think it is individual. I think that in everything in life there is something called, for want of a better word, in chemistry it's called a catalyst, something that accelerates an action. In the army it's called a force multiplier, right? A gun is a force multiplier, right? It sort of multiplies the force that you have. In engineering it's called a machine, right? It takes an input and gives you a larger output, right? It multiplies your output. In the service business it's culture, right? And we are oblivious to culture, right? And we really don't know that this culture exists us. But it is this culture which sort of makes and breaks organizations. The reason why, if there are two of us and if Tajinder was to come forward and we are both receptionists and you were to give a room key to Tajinder, you would say, Mr. Tajinder Singh, have a good day, right? You've done a great job. And if he was to come to me and assume I was to say, you look tired, can I book you in the spa and can I do that? I've done something more than what you have done. That is discretionary effort. Not to say that anything was wrong. But what made me do that discretionary effort was the culture that was created. I know that somebody is watching above me, and this is going to be appreciated, and this is the way that things are done. This is how, but culture starts at the very top. And it is culture that flows down. And I think it is culture that will make ordinary people deliver extraordinary results.
Nakul, thank you very much for...
if I may take one more minute, etc. And I'm a great proponent of this, and I think that I've got, the sort of best forum and the best audience to take this message forward. It's a very interesting, it's very interesting, this is my closing. It's very interesting that, try this out at a social evening, that you walk up to a person and you sort of haven't met him before and you introduce each other and you ask him, what do you do? Right? Now, it will speak volumes of what that person is. If he was to ask me, I could say I'm Director ITC. I could say I'm Nakul Anand. I could say I work for ITC. I could say I could say that I'm in service. I could say just about anything. But it's volumes. It speaks of what the organization does for you, what the person thinks of himself, etc. My advice to all of you is, whenever somebody asks you what you do, you're a professional. Your answer is, I'm a hotelier. Right? You're a hotelier first, Leela, ITC, Oberoi, Taj second. We must all collectively take great pride in this profession. I think it's the greatest profession of all that we've all had. And we must all, a doctor will always say, I'm a doctor. Right? An engineer will more often than not say, I'm an engineer. A dentist will say, I'm a dentist. Right? Very seldom do you hear a person say, I'm a hotelier. Right? With pride. Right? So let's put our hoteliering as a profession, rather than saying, I'm Vedanta, you say, I'm a doctor first. No, I'm a hotelier first. Right? Then I decide where I'm working, etc. That's the last piece of advice I leave to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Rajiv.